Our first feature premiere for MLB The Show 23, featuring a very special guest, will begin shortly. We want to once again thank Bob Kendrick, the museum, and all of the 8 families who helped us along on this journey. Without you, this project couldn't have become a reality. Also, be sure to watch all the way until the end so you can see the exclusive first look at gameplay from Storylines. Hi everyone, Ramon Russell here from the MLB The Show development team. Today is a very special day. We're going to talk about a very special project with a very special human being, Negro Leagues president, Bob Kendrick. Bob, how you doing?
Ramon, I'm great, man. I'm thrilled to be sitting down with you talking about this amazing project.
So, some of our fans might not have a ton of knowledge about the Negro Leagues and the museum and yourself. So can you give us a little backstory about you growing up and your passion for this story and how you ended up becoming the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum?
It's an amazing story in itself because, like most people who will likely be introduced to the Negro Leagues through this incredible project that we're embarking on, I didn't know a whole lot about the Negro Leagues. And I considered myself to be a baseball fan. And I was amazed how little I actually knew about the history of this game. Like most, I knew the names Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, Cool Papa Bell. Those are transcending names. Most baseball fans have likely heard those names. Now, you may not know just how great they really were, but you probably heard their names. But to be honest, Ramon, I had no idea about the breadth, the depth, the scope, the magnitude that this history represented both on and off the field. And I became enamored in it. I guess you could say engrossed. I wanted to learn as much as I could. And man, I didn't want to keep it to myself. I wanted everybody else to feel the same way that I felt about it. And little did I know, in 1993, I'm working for the local newspaper, the daily newspaper in Kansas City. I was senior copywriter in the Kansas City Star's promotions department, which functioned as its in-house advertising agency. And so I drew the assignment of promoting the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum's first ever traveling exhibition, an exhibition called Discover Greatness. It is still touring the country to this day. And so I decided, well, let me go down and visit this Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, which honestly I didn't even know existed at that time. And I go to the Lincoln building where the museum was kind of housed. And I go up to the 3rd floor and I knock on the door, and the late Don Motley, who was the executive director of this fledgling museum, I look at him and I say, I'm looking for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And he looks back at me and he says, son, you're standing in it. It was just this one room office, not much bigger than this area that we're sitting here talking right now.
No way.
But little did I know that I had just walked into what would become my passion. I fell in love with the story, and I fell in love with the amazing athletes who made this story. And then I started to meet them. And of course, as you know, one athlete in particular, my dear friend, the late great Buck O'Neil, my longtime friend, my confidant, my mentor, and I fell even deeper in love. And so at this point, I just wanted to do any and everything that I could to assist the museum in its mission to preserve and celebrate and illuminate this piece of history. I had no idea, man, that it would turn into a career. And perhaps one of the most gratifying things that I could have ever done professionally or personally. And so I have been blessed to be a part of this organization for now 3 decades. Who knew?
Years. Who knew?
Yeah, who knew?
Who knew?
You go from being a volunteer to now trying to lead this great institution. And so it's been an amazing journey for me.
And now we're joined by somebody also very important to this project. Someone who has 5 Emmys, not 3, not 4, he has 5 of them. Mr. Jared, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ramon. I'm so happy to be here.
Why are you so excited to be working on this project?
I think it's just exciting to work on something completely new for the game that's been around for a while. But in my heart, like, I'm so proud to just have my name associated with this awesome project we're working on. And I'm just honored to learn from Bob here about the Negro Leagues and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And I'm just super excited just to share this with everybody that plays the game.
Yeah. So Bob, what makes the Negro League story such an important story?
For me, the story of the Negro Leagues is America at her worst, but also America at her triumphant best. Because this is a story of strong-willed athletes who refused to accept the notion that they were unfit to play this game. And even though this story is anchored against the backdrop of American segregation, a horrible chapter in this country's history, the story here is what really emerged out of segregation. This wonderful story of triumph and conquest. And that is why I believe that those who visit the Negro Leagues Museum have fallen in love with this story. But then again, what's not to love about this story? Because it is everything that America prides herself in being. Because it is about pride, passion, perseverance, determination, courage. And so, yeah, you leave the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum cheering the power of the human spirit.
You know, Bob, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's the exact same way, I felt when we went to the museum. I remember we were all talking about making sure, everybody had the right feeling. And I was like, just wait till we go and shoot at the museum. Something tells me once we get in those walls, everything, every puzzle piece will really start to come together, and it definitely did for me. What about you, Jared?
Yeah, going through and seeing all the memorabilia and even the chicken wire, like when you first walk in, and the fact that you have to go and you have to learn and you have to, before you can run out there and be on the field, the whole experience was incredible. I had goosebumps the whole time, and it somehow made me even more excited to work on this.
Nice. So we have a new mode, which is how we're introducing the Negro Leagues into the game in this new game experience. How does it feel for you, Bob, that a completely new audience is going to be able to experience these stories in a completely new way in an interactive medium?
It's exciting, and I feel so proud, and I hope that those who will be introduced to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum through this understand how this museum is trying to move beyond how museums are typically seen. I think it's important that a museum, particularly a history museum, and even more so a cultural institution like the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, work diligently to create relevancy. See, that's what it's all about. How do I connect with that next generation? I think there's a misnomer as we look at young people, and some will say they don't care about history. Of course they care about history, but it is important how that history is brought to them. And so now we're bringing it into a mode and medium that they are accustomed to, they are comfortable with. And I think there's going to be a new generation of those who will fall in love with the Negro Leagues, just like I did when I discovered the Negro Leagues on a broader spectrum way back sometime in 1993. And that's what makes me excited about this. It puts the museum in a cutting edge position. It's forward thinking. But you think back and it actually embodies the excitement that was Negro Leagues Baseball. Negro Leagues Baseball, as I've oftentimes described it, was hip hop in a jazz era. So this is, I think, a perfect way to bring this to a new generation of young folks.
Fantastic. And so let's talk about how this actually works in game. We knew that when we were brainstorming this project that we weren't just going to throw Satchel Paige into MLB The Show. That would have been very disrespectful, and probably half of our player base wouldn't even know who he was. And so there were so many things that we needed to accomplish and so many hurdles that we needed to get over, while also remembering that this is an interactive medium. So after lots and lots of conversations, we came up with this new game experience called Storylines, where you're going to learn about these individuals and their triumphs and their tribulations and the things which made them so special. But at the same time, then you're going to go in game and you're going to play as them. You know, you're going to play as Satchel Paige. You're going to play as Rube Foster. You're going to play as Buck O'Neil. So when we were thinking about how to do this from a game side, Jared, we knew we needed to really go all in. You know, Satchel Paige needs to look like Satchel Paige. Those Kansas City Monarchs uniform, they need to look right. You know, the sleeves back then were a lot longer because those uniforms were wool back in the day. The stadiums, you know, we have 6 Negro League stadiums that we're introducing into MLB The Show this year. The crowd needs to look different. The bases were different. You know, the umpires were wearing different gear. So you're going to see all of that, you know, in this experience in the game.
Yeah, there's a level of authenticity that comes along with that, and it also, you know, we know how important this project is, and to see that attention to detail on some of this stuff has been mind-blowing for me. And then, you know, kind of to your point too, we're introducing this sort of, you know, mode that's going to tell you a story, and then guess what? The video game, the gaming aspect of it picks up right where that story leaves off. And it's just so exciting to kind of see these things kind of meld together into something I think is going to be like really memorable gameplay for people.
And we really wanted to make you feel special and make you feel something once that loading screen ended and you were in game as these players. You know, so Andrew and Kirby and the presentation team, they built over 70 new presentations when you're going into these historic stadiums. And we really wanted to make sure we highlighted these individuals and made it feel different, because it needs to feel different. Like we couldn't just do the same thing that you'll see in the regular part of the game. Everything about this storyline's experience needed to feel special, and I'm really confident and happy that we did not take any shortcuts. We did not take any shortcuts. You know, we spent so much time trying to do every little thing we could to make this feel right and make it feel special.
Yeah, to add to that point too, even music plays a part in what we're presenting here, and we've got our own soundtrack for this part of the mode. And then with getting into the nitty-gritty with the stadiums and with the uniforms, with everything, trying to maintain that level of accuracy that we can. And our stadiums are, you know, going from the early 1900s all the way to the 1950s in these 6 stadiums that we're introducing this year. It's just all of it coming together. It's going to be such an exciting, like, product for people to play. I don't want to call it a product. I want to call it just like a celebration, because that's what it is. It's immersive, interactive celebration for people. Yeah.
So Jared, what are the date ranges for the 6 era-specific Negro League stadiums?
Where the Monarchs played in Kansas City at Mulebach Field, 1923 to 1948. We've got Hilldale Park in Darby, Pennsylvania, which is from 1929 to 1932. Southside Park, which predates Comiskey Park, which is also in the game, so that goes from 1911 all the way to 1951. Forbes Field, 1922 to 1939, and Busch Stadium in Indianapolis, not the one in St. Louis, 1944 to 1950. So
yeah, and
we're doing it.
Yep, and the reason, you know, there are these date ranges is doing a project like this, it's so hard to lock down one date for a stadium, because we have to look at when did all of these players play in these stadiums. And so we kind of had to do a date range to make sure that we could grab as much of the time frame of when they played in these stadiums as humanly possible. And we made them as accurate as we possibly could. We had to make some changes, you know, we had to take some creative liberties, but they're mild, like foul poles. You know, some of the stadiums didn't have foul poles yet, but we need foul poles because we need to know if it's a home run or a foul ball. But you won't see a foul pole from a modern stadium. You know, you'll see a wooden foul pole in the stadium. The dugout, some of these stadiums didn't even have dugouts. But in our game, like, we actually have to put the players and the managers somewhere. Yeah. So in some of the stadiums, you know, we had to put dugouts. It was such a fun, stressful process doing the research, you know, with Bob and the museum on trying to make all of these assets as accurate, you know, as they possibly could be. You know, I've learned so much, you know, the past, you know, almost 2 years, you know, just starting on this project. And we are just starting, you know. This is year 1 of storylines. This is the inaugural roster of the Negro Leagues. It's just the first 8 players. We got so many more people to talk about. Yep. So let's talk about our roster. So it's called MLB The Show Presents Storylines, a new game experience about the Negro League, Season 1. And the reason why we call it Season 1 is because this is a multi-year project. We have a multi-year deal with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and our good friend Bob. It's going to take us some time, you know, to tell these stories the right way. Funny thing is, when I was talking to Derek Jeter about this, he was like, only 5 years? You ain't gonna be able to tell all these stories in 5 years. And I was like, oh man, that's not what I needed to hear right now, Derek. So this year we're doing 8 players. You know, next year there'll be another group of players, and so on and so on. Because we know we need to take our time, and we need to do this right. So let's talk about the Season 1 roster. Let's start with Leroy Satchel Paige. Without spoiling any of this amazing content that our users are going to experience, you know, what made Satchel so special in your eyes?
He had everything. He had everything you needed to be a star. He had longevity. He had the great stuff, but he also had the charisma. Yeah, and it's no small feat that he was the Negro Leagues and one of baseball's biggest and brightest stars. If Satchel Paige had been doing his thing in this era of social media, well, he'd be just what he was then, the biggest star on the face of the planet, because he had the goods. So I think, again, our young audience is going to fall in love with the brashness and the style and flair that Satchel brought with him, and he oozed with confidence. Yeah, some would say he was bragging, but it ain't bragging when you can do it.
And Satchel Paige was inducted into the MLB Hall of Fame, you know, in 1971. Let's talk about our next player, Hilton Smith, who played with Satchel. And as you call it, he was Satchel's shadow, is that right?
Satchel's shadow. And Hilton Smith was the polar opposite of Satchel. When Satchel walked in the room was going to light up. Hilton Smith was quiet, unassuming, but just as lethal on the mound. And cerebral, but he matched great intelligence with also equally great stuff. Great command of his fastball, a curveball that ranks there amongst the best in this game's history, black or white or brown. And so Hilton Smith he was a quiet competitor. Yeah, he wanted to beat you, but it wasn't a very kind of outgoing manner. He was always seemingly in control. There were those who lived in his neighborhood who did not know how great he really was, because he never talked about himself until he was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Those who played for teams that he coached, they had no idea. They just knew him as Mr. Smith. And then all of a sudden, their Mr. Smith is being inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and that's when they realized just how great he was. That's how unassuming Hilton Smith was.
I remember, I mean, it's one of those lines that'll just stick with me, is the way that you just said in one of the videos, you just say, oh yeah, Hilton Smith was the truth. That's for sure.
Inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2001. When we were discussing, you know, internally and with you, Bob, about we're doing this project, it's going to be multi-year. Who should be the first handful of players, you know, that we introduced? And we knew there were a few names we had to have included. And you can't talk about the Negro Leagues and black baseball without the father of black baseball, Rube Foster. So tell us a little bit about Rube.
The genius. My estimation, the greatest baseball mind the sport has ever seen. And still virtually no one knows who the heck he is. But when you look at Rube Foster's career, Rube Foster would have been a Hall of Famer as a player, great pitcher. As a manager, one of the most brilliant managers of all time. Tactician, savvy, smart, strategic. And he would have also gone in the Hall of Fame as an owner. You don't find many that check all 3 boxes. And what he did in establishing the Negro Leagues, basically giving the Negro Leagues its independence, makes Rube Foster one of the most significant voices, not in black baseball history, but in baseball history. And now more folks are going to know who he was.
Nice. Who else is on this
Yeah,
roster?
we've got a few others to go through that are equally, their stories are incredible. Hank Thompson is the next one. He's one of the players that should be his name should be recognized with Larry Doby and Jackie, and just it hasn't happened.
No,
yeah.
it hasn't. And through this video game, people are going to be introduced to an incredible ball player whose career was tragically cut short. But Henry Thompson is the first and only player to integrate 2 major league teams. So he integrates the St. Louis Browns in 1947, which is also going to surprise people because most of us who know Jackie Robinson's story, we just assume that it was only Jackie who goes into the major leagues in 1947. As you all well know now, there were 5 players who would actually take the field in 1947. And as we so typically do, we celebrate the first. We don't always remember the other guys. And so Larry Doby, Hank Thompson, Willard Brown, Dan Bankhead all play in the major leagues in 1947. Hank Thompson, as I mentioned, holds the distinction of having integrated 2 major league teams, the St. Louis Browns and the New York Giants. And the versatility that he displayed was incredible. He was part of an outfield that was the first all-black outfield in Major League Baseball history. Hank Thompson, Willie Mays, and my dear friend, the late, great Monty Irvin, formed the Major's first all-black outfield. He was an infielder by trade. And so hopefully people will kind of now want to learn a little bit more about the great Hank Thompson.
You know, really, one of the things that stuck out to me with Hank was his smile. Hank Thompson's smile, which you'll see, you know, in the game and storylines, it just lights you up. You could tell he really enjoyed playing this game. He just had his smile just makes you feel a certain type of way every time you see it.
So next, we'll talk about Buck O'Neil, your good friend.
Yes. I am thrilled that Buck is being a part of this game as a player. Because most of us who fell in love with Buck O'Neil, we never saw him play. As I remind people, we fell in love with the Buck O'Neil who taught us about the heroes of the Negro Leagues. And we fell even deeper in love with the Buck O'Neil who so beautifully and vividly demonstrated to all of us that you could indeed get further in this life with love than you could with hate. But as Buck would remind you as well, I could play. And now they're going to be able to see Buck O'Neil as the player. Tremendously talented first baseman for the better part of his career with the Kansas City Monarchs. He started his career as a rookie with the Memphis Red Sox and was traded over to Kansas City. And Buck could play. Dynamic defensive first baseman, line drive, power, clutch hitter. And so to see him in a playing mode, I think is going to be something that folks had not been accustomed, because Buck lived long enough that a lot of people fell in love with Buck O'Neil through all the stories that he shared. But he really didn't talk much about himself as a player, and we get an opportunity now to see him in a playing mode, and I'm excited about that.
My favorite thing too is, people will see it when they play the game, is you get to see Buck's character too.
Yeah.
And just he is another one of those people that just seemed to light up a room, any room he walked into, and tell incredible stories.
Oh, there's no doubt. When Buck walked in the room, just like Satchel, the room lit up. Yeah, and he had an aura about him and a presence that you wanted to gravitate to Buck. And if you didn't come to Buck, he was going to come to you. You know, so you were not going to leave that room not knowing Buck O'Neil and Buck O'Neil not knowing you. The man never met a stranger in his life. And I got to witness this firsthand for so many years. And I think I'm better as a result of having been around Buck O'Neil. So you're absolutely right. He just exuded, and this passion oozed from him, and it spilled over onto other folks. And then you were changed for the better as a result of being there with Buck O'Neil.
Okay, so next is a player that I think a lot of people will actually recognize, but they're not going to know the whole story about him.
Yeah.
Jackie Robinson.
And I think a lot of folks will still be surprised that Jackie Robinson's illustrious professional baseball career began in Kansas City with the great Kansas City Monarchs. I do think, and I've seen this look of awe from so many who have come visit the museum, that they think Jackie just walked out of nowhere and started playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. But as we know, his real rookie season was 1945 in Kansas City. And he was there for all of 5 months before he was eventually plucked away by the Brooklyn Dodgers and would become the barrier breaker, the guy who would break Major League Baseball's then 6-decade-long self-imposed color barrier. But more importantly, he would also jettison the civil rights movement in this country. And that is something that is oftentimes overlooked in Jackie's incredible story. He was carrying the weight of 21 million black folks when he walked across those lines. And I remind our guest at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, had he failed, an entire race of people would have failed. That's an enormous amount of pressure for one human being to have to bear, and then to play a game that is predicated on failure and you can't fail. You all know this. Baseball is a game of failure at its crux. If you get 3 hits every 10 trips to the plate, man, you're a Hall of Famer. You're a Hall of Famer. And he cannot fail. So while he may not have been the best player in the Negro Leagues, he was absolutely the right player from the Negro Leagues to be the first. And that doesn't mean that there weren't others that could have possibly done it. There's no margin of error. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that first one cannot fail. And Jackie had everything that was necessary for him to be successful against all odds. Yeah, against all odds. And like I said, carrying the weight of a race of people on his back. He was getting pressure from both sides, from those who didn't want him to be there, and for those millions of black folks who were counting on him. They're flocking to those games to see him play. And so how he handled himself with such grace, class, and dignity in the face of tremendous social adversity is still remarkable to me.
So next, we've got John Donaldson, who this is a player I knew nothing about before learning about him at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. But what a showman.
If I had one disappointment in the 2022 Hall of Fame election where my friend Buck O'Neill was finally inducted, it likely was the fact that John Donaldson did not garner enough votes to be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, because he should absolutely be there. John Donaldson is one of the most amazing pitchers in the history of this game. Great left-handed pitcher with over 400 verifiable wins, over 5,000 verifiable strikeouts, and other incredible feats that would only happen in a video game. So it's only appropriate that John Donaldson would be part of a video game, because these numbers are real.
They are insane. And you know, the John Donaldson Network really helped us out with everything related to John Donaldson. And what you're going to learn, you know, when you're playing this mode and you're in John Donaldson's storyline, he pitched everywhere.
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 Yeah, it'd be easier to tell you the places that he didn't pitch than it would be to tell you all the places that he did. And that's where Satchel got it from. That's where Satchel loved barnstorming. He probably loved barnstorming more than he did playing in the Negro Leagues, because it was so restraining. And then even more so in the Major Leagues, which was even more restraining, because he was watching John Donaldson do the exact same things that we fell in love with Satchel for doing later on. John Donaldson lit that fire for a Satchel Paige. And it's great that people are going to get to hear this name, because he's not one that is oftentimes mentioned amongst the great stars of the Negro Leagues, because I guess he has that disadvantage of being one of the early era players. And so he wasn't talked about as much as some of the more contemporary guys from the 30s and 40s got talked about. So those guys who played, and he spent so much of his career prior to the formation of the Negro Leagues, and then, of course, moved over into the actual organized Negro Leagues. And so, yeah, I don't know if anyone's more fitting to be in a video game than John Donaldson.
John Wesley Donaldson. You know, as you mentioned, you know, he pitched so early, almost like pre-Negro League baseball. And that was one of the real difficulties. There were so many in this project. There were so many speed bumps and hurdles that we had to jump through to be able to make sure we could do everything we could to learn as much as we could about these players to get everything right. Because his pitching motions has to be right. So for John Donaldson, for instance, there may be one video of him pitching. And so we went and got that video, and it's grainy.
I think it's all like
we broke it down.
30 seconds.
30-something seconds, 37,
and
38
he pitches
seconds.
like twice, and it's grainy. And so we had to go into that video and literally draw outlines frame by frame to be able to rebuild John Donaldson's pitching motion to make it as accurate as it possibly could be. For instance, like Rube Foster, there's no video of Rube Foster pitching. So how does he pitch? You know, we took a lot of care in every single detail. Martin DeHigo, who we're about to talk about, there's not a video of him pitching. There's a video of him throwing a practice pitch on a baseball field with a hat and a suit on.
Right.
And so we had
Years later,
we had to use that video and kind of guess, okay, if that's his pitching motion, what does his legs look like to be able to build his pitching motion? Buck O'Neill's batting stance. We don't have video of Buck O'Neill playing in the Negro Leagues as the Kansas City Monarchs. But what we do have, we have video of Buck O'Neill holding the bat at a bunch of different baseball games and doing a bunch of practice swings. And so that's what we made Buck O'Neill swing and where we got his stance from. So we had to be so clever to get all of these details. For some of the uniforms, I couldn't find any photos of what some of the Kansas City Monarchs and what the All Nations uniforms looked like from the waist down. Had to use a bobblehead of John Donaldson to figure out what the pants and the socks looked like and if the color was right. That's also how we found out, you know, the right colors for the logo on the hat for that particular uniform that he wore. When I tell y'all, we all spent a tremendous amount of time with Bob and the museum and the MLB and the Baseball Hall of Fame, digging through everything to make this as accurate as we possibly could. You know, if something's not accurate, it's not for a lack of effort.
Right.
You know, it's not for a lack of effort. But you know, this whole project and working on it has been so gratifying. We've had so much fun. We can't wait for you all to be able to play it and learn more, you know, about these amazing individuals. But there's one more that we haven't talked about.
This is the one. If I was playing the game, this would be the first one I would go to, because Martin the Ego could do it all.
Yeah. El Maestro, the master, because just as you said, he could do it all. Played all 9 positions, played all 9 of them well. And I hope that resonates with folks. He played all 9 positions, and he was great at all 9 of them. Or in the words of my friend Monty Irvin, who said he was a beautiful ball player. And he was. He too had everything that you needed to be a star. Movie star good looks, statuesque, 6'3", 6'4", you know, and was just a dynamite ball player enshrined into 5 different countries' halls of fame. And yet no one knows who he is. How could you not know about a ball player of this magnitude? And to a person who walks into the museum, and there he is standing at home plate in the form of a life-size statue on our Field of Legends, and everybody's marveling that they don't know. They had not heard about the great Martin Dihigo. And that was important for us as well because it also brings in the inclusivity of the Negro Leagues. As I remind people all the time, Negro Leagues didn't care what color you were. All they cared was, can you play? And so they welcomed any and everyone to play in the Negro Leagues. So that cross-pollination that we see with the Negro Leagues in Spanish-speaking countries, where the Negro Leagues would go to Cuba and were welcomed when they went there. And then those dark-skinned Spanish-speaking athletes suffered the same indignities in this country that the American black players were having to deal with as well. They too were shunned from the major leagues, so they found sanctuary playing in the Negro Leagues. So I think it's really important that Dihigo was one of the players that became a focal point for this game, because I do hope that people walk away understanding how there was this cultural bond between black and brown as well. And that too should be celebrated.
Absolutely. Let's bring it back to, current day. A lot of the teams and players always make sure to come visit the museum and talk to you. Can you talk a little bit about your connection, to the current black players in Major League Baseball, like Tristan McKenzie, Curtis Granderson, CeCe Sabathia, Dave Roberts?
Yeah, our dear friend Tim Anderson, who is a mainstay at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Mookie Betts, particularly when he was over with the Red Sox. These are folks who always seemingly find their way to the museum. I had the honor of walking Tristan McKenzie, who I think is going to be just an amazing ball player, through the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and seeing him just be in awe of Satchel Paige, a player who broke into the major leagues with then the Cleveland Indians. And here's Tristan standing all of 6'5", long, lanky, built almost identical to Satchel. And he's standing there next to the life-size statue that we have of Satchel. And it was one of those moments because it felt as if it was a legacy moment. Here comes the next young star in baseball. And that was special for me. It never gets old. And honestly, Ramon, I don't care if they're black, brown, or white who are walking through that museum to share those stories, to see their reactions to the story, and to help them understand the commonality that they share with the Negro Leagues. And it boils down for me to one simple thing: love of the game. You play this game because you love it. Now, sometimes we as fans can get a little fickle because we equate virtually everything in our society to money. Mm-hmm. And because the young athlete has been afforded an opportunity to make a great living playing the game that they love, we just assume that they don't love the game as much as the players from yesteryear. Of course they do, because they're still playing a game that they played when they were a kid, and they played it for free. And if they had to play it for free today, they would. You love the game. But as I also share with them, you will never see a greater example of love of the game than you do when you walk through the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. As you both know, they had to love it in order to endure the things that they had to endure. And I think it provides a perspective and a greater appreciation for that young athlete for just how good they really have it. Yeah, so all of a sudden, whatever you might be going through, it won't be that.
Absolutely.
No, it won't be that. And so it allows you, I think, and maybe gives you a little bit more wherewithal to deal with whatever might be coming your way. And so that's the foundation that I think we've built with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And that's why I love sharing these stories with them. And they know how difficult this game is to play under the best of circumstances. And yet the Negro League players never allowed that set of social circumstances to kill their love of the game.
So we've introduced all 8 players, superstars. Is there one that you are most excited for people to learn about?
Man, that's like picking your favorite child. It is very difficult because it's hard not to fall in love with Satchel Paige because he was the show. As we talk about the name of this video game, Satchel was the show. But for me, that people will now get an opportunity to learn about the feats of John Wesley Donaldson, I think that really excites me, because I think they too will walk away in awe of just how great Donaldson was. But again, you could ask me this question tomorrow and I'd probably have a different answer, because that is how cool this stuff really is, and how much I enjoy learning about these legendary stars of Black baseball history. And I'm just so excited to see all of them being introduced in this medium to be a part of the show. And yeah, but no, this is exciting. John Wesley Donaldson, I think, will really capture the hearts and imaginations of folks. But again, how could you not love Martin de Higo? Mm-hmm. You know, guy playing all 9 positions. It's just incredible, and so it's pretty special. And I'm so excited. And I am so proud that the museum and that I got to lend my voice to what I think is going to be a groundbreaking kind of project. So thank you guys for the work that you've done and that we will be doing to bring the Negro Leagues mainstream in the minds of a new generation, and hopefully the hearts of a new generation of young people.
No, thank you, Bob. I've said this so many times. This project doesn't exist without you and the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. That's the entire project. Our task was to take your stories and to take these stories and make it work in an exciting and compelling way in a video game. When we were first brainstorming this project many, many moons ago, we were trying to figure out what's our mission statement, or what's the goal. And we do that with most of our features, like what's the goal of any feature that we introduced? And I was like, well, let me go to the Negro League Museum's website. And I found the mission statement for the Negro League Baseball Museum's website, and it's educate, enlighten, and inspire, celebrate the rich history of the Negro Leagues. And it's coincidentally, well, not coincidentally, it's intentionally our same mission statement and motto for this project: to educate, to enlighten, and to inspire in an interactive way that works for a video game. Being able to give you just a small piece of this history. So what we're hoping, after you play this mode, maybe you'll go to 18th and Vine in Kansas City and go pay Bob Kendrick a visit, and go check out, the exhibits there. Bob, if there was one thing that you'd want people to know about the Negro Leagues that gets overlooked, what would it be?
That it was a thriving Black business enterprise, 3rd largest Black-owned business in this country. And while it's so easy to fall in love with the romantic nature of these courageous athletes who overcame tremendous social adversity to play the game that they love, we do sometimes lose sight that this was a thriving Black business enterprise. And when you come to the museum, you gain the entire experience. There are 3 key themes that, for me, stem from this incredible story. It is a story about the importance of economic empowerment. It is an amazing story that highlights an unprecedented level of leadership that emerged in the African American community. And ultimately, it is the story of the social advancement of America, as Jackie Robinson, again, is handpicked from the Kansas City Monarchs to break Major League Baseball's color barrier. All of those themes are wrapped inside this wonderful story of these tremendously talented athletes who needed a forum to showcase their world-class baseball abilities. And that's what the Negro Leagues gave them. Well, fellas, the one thing that was crystal clear to me as you all have welcomed me here to the San Diego studios and taken me on the tour to meet so many of the folks that were involved with this epic project is that it is indeed a passion project. That came across very clearly to me. I felt it. It means a great deal to not only me, but everyone involved there at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. What do you hope that those who will play this video game and take on storylines, What do you hope they walk away with?
I hope they walk away with the same feeling I had the first time I learned these stories and the first time that I experienced the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, where you just can't help but be inspired, and everything feels just like a celebration of how amazing and important these people are. And I know I've said it before, but I don't know if I was expecting to work on something that would impact me this much, but to be just a small part of it, it's like one of the, the things I'm most proud of in my career up to this point. So I appreciate just being a little part of this journey.
This was overwhelming in the beginning. And it was our first Zoom call, our very first Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there going, how in the world can we can't do this. Like, we're a year video game, 8-month development cycle. Our cycle's 8 months. And then, we got QA, you got to print this and all that. And I was like, how in the world can we do this justice? And I asked you a question about the Jackie Robinson film, which you were a part of. And you said that the film, we can't tell all of Jackie's story, and that's not what biopics are. That's not really what they're designed to do. Y'all chose, and the Jackie Robinson family chose 2 years of Jackie's life and career to focus on. And the hope is that after you've experienced that, you'll then go to a library and read about them, or you'll watch some other documentaries about them, or you'll pick up some more books about them. And then it became much easier. I was like, oh, okay, this is a beginning. It's not the beginning, the middle, and the end. This is just the start. Like, kind of like a Cliff Notes. Like, we're trying to give you just a little piece, just to spark your interest enough, and then you can go on your own and continue to learn about Jackie Robinson's story, or any of these stories. And when you said that, Bob, it be like the weight of the world was like, oh, okay, we don't have to do everything. We just have to do these stories right. We have to do enough. And even then, after that first conversation, I was not super enthusiastic of our ability to be able to launch this in 1 year. I'm like, Jason, we need a little bit more time. Jason's director of production. And Jason was like, no, we can do this. And Jason has handled all of the licensing stuff. And I was like, you're not gonna be able to sleep. The licensing for this project alone is a
chaos.
Monster. It's been chaos. And Jason was like, no, we're gonna be able to do it. And like you mentioned, the passion for the project, it's been everywhere through everybody who's been attached to it. Everybody really stepped up in ways I definitely wasn't expecting. I was like, I know this is really important to me, but to see just how important it became to everybody else, and to see just the hard work that everybody put in, has been incredible. And Jared, you mentioned a celebration. And that's been a through line through this whole project. Like, this is a celebration of this league, of these players. It's gonna take us some time to do all of this. And what I'm hoping our fans and people who plays this mode and this experience gets out of it is that they're educated, that they're enlightened, and that they're inspired. Which is the motto and the mission statement of the Negro League Baseball Museum. So if we can do that just a little bit, that's it for me. I'll have a smile on my face, from here to Tupelo, Mississippi.
Well, I think I would be remiss if I did not tip my cap to you for planting this seed, and then for all of you who have now nurtured and watered the seed to the point that we are now right there at the cusp of doing something epic. And as Buck O'Neil would say, to make sure that those unsung heroes of the Negro Leagues are never forgotten. So I know this has been a labor of love for each and every one of you involved in this project. and from all of us at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, it means the world, and I can't wait. And like I said, I just hope everyone loves what we've been able to collaborate on. So thank you to Sony, the PlayStation family. You know, you're all part now of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum family, whether you want to be or not, you're there, and we can't thank you guys enough for what you've done to now elevate the awareness of this tremendously rich history. So thank you.
No, thank you, Bob. Thank you so much, man. That means a lot. That storylines, we can't wait for everybody to play it. You know, MLB The Show 23 comes out March 28th, and it comes out March 24th on Early Access. You can find Bob Kendrick at the Kansas City Negro Leagues Baseball Museum at historic 18th and Vine. Also, for every collector's edition sold of MLB The Show 23 in the United States, we'll be donating $1 to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. You know, and at the end here, there are a lot of thank yous that we need to give out. You know, first of all, Bob, thank you for everything. You know, it's just been a long time coming. You know, we've had, you know, a lot of conversations, you know, all these texting you like crazy, trying to get answers to stuff.
Usually while I'm on the golf course.
You know, we want to thank the museum. We want to thank Major League Baseball, the Players Association. We want to thank the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Jared, you know, personally, you know, I want to thank you. Everybody at PlayStation Creative, Ian Rickles, Charles Cruz, the whole gameplay team, Ashley Sanders, Charles Eck, Janet, Matt Oka, Lisa Gibson, Jason Villa, Chris Cutliff, Alex Hatford, you know, Sydney. I can't say enough about Sydney, man. This young woman has, fresh out of college, killer. Like this project wouldn't be where it is without Sydney, man. We really appreciate all the work you've put into this, Sydney. Brandon Aiken, Gavin, who you met earlier today, Chris Muriel, Lane, Rory, Steven. I know I'm forgetting a lot of individuals. Bree. So many people really, you know, poured their heart and soul into this project. And I personally am so grateful for everybody and all of the hard work that everybody's contributed to this. I've been at this company for, it'll be 15 years in June. 15 years in June. And I never thought we were gonna ever do this. I never thought we were gonna be able to do this. And I did not think we were gonna be able to do this, to do what we've done. So thank you to the leadership here at the San Diego studio, the leadership at PlayStation, for allowing us to tell this story the way that it should have been told. I heard this quote, you know, it's nothing about us without us, you know, and I'm really appreciative of everybody giving us the agency to be able to tell these stories in our own voice, and everybody else who's really supported this project. You know, that's all I got to say, man. I'm just super appreciative, and I can't wait for y'all to play this game. I hope y'all enjoy it, and it's only year one. You know, it's only year one. We got so many more stories to tell. So, you know, that's it for, you know, the feature premiere for Storylines. I wish we could have told y'all more, but we wanted to be a surprise. Again, MLB The Show will be out very soon, March 28th. We hope you enjoy the mode. That's it, we out.
In many ways, Jackie Roosevelt Robinson was the beginning, but also the end. He was the beginning of change, not only in baseball, but in American society. His breaking of the color barrier also signaled the end of the Negro Leagues. And a lot of people don't know that Jackie Robinson's illustrious professional baseball career began in Kansas City in 1945 with the Kansas City Monarchs. The question that is so commonly posed to me is, was he the best player in the Negro Leagues? And the answer is no. There were other Negro League veterans who were far superior baseball players to Jackie Robinson. And that is not to disparage Jackie Robinson, because he is one of the greatest athletes in American sports history. He was a four-sport star at UCLA. Baseball was his weakest sport, but Jackie Robinson was absolutely the right man to be the first. So he's college educated. He had served in the military. He was disciplined. He would become married to the beautiful Rachel Robinson. He was stable. You see, Jackie had what I like to refer to as the intangibles that better prepared him to deal with the immense racial hatred that he would be confronted with, which is part of the reason why he was the chosen one to break Major League Baseball's color barrier.
And now it's going to be Jackie Robinson. Maybe expecting a punt here. Third baseman playing in on the edge of the grass. Jackie Robinson had so much inner strength to endure the burden of being the first to cross the Major League Baseball color line. And the first pitch misses for ball one. At the belt and fires. And a foul ball. Chris, in his memoir, Jackie talked about the role that faith had in making him the man he'd become.
Yeah, he was teaching Sunday school every week at his church while being a four-sport athlete at UCLA. And his reverend from childhood became a mentor and longtime friend to him. It was a major touchstone in his life.
Ground ball left side, and that's just foul.
Those first couple of years in Major League Baseball, before Jackie was allowed to fight back, his self-restraint was just incredible given what he went through. And on top of that, he was clearly one of the best players in the league on the field.
Ripped on a line. Can't glove it cleanly. Now a long throw home. It's offline, and he scores. And it's 1-0.